Hey Art Nerds, we have been through so many Dollar Tree products together and we've still got so many more left to go. So today we are taking a look at the Jot 8 color watercolor set. This looks pretty similar to Crayola watercolor sets or the Up and Up watercolor sets or even the Prang Watercolor sets that I have reviewed here on the channel and over at natosoup.blogspot.com over the past few years. This is part of my ongoing Dollar Tree review series for summer 2019. Every so often I decide I really want to take a look at what's new and what's available in inexpensive watercolors, and this is a slightly different packaging from the last time I took a look at Dollar Tree watercolors, so I'm interested in seeing how these have changed. So we have here 8 watercolors in a plastic container. These are sold under the Jot imprint, and it says it conforms to ASTM D4236, which is sort of a standard of non-toxicity. And they seem to be really cheaply packaged and manufactured, even cheaper than the last time I took a look at Dollar Tree watercolors. So I'm kind of hoping the time, care, and money was spent on making the watercolors themselves better. That's one of the reasons why I picked it up. I thought, cheaper packaging, maybe they're spending more money on the product itself. These were imported by Greenbrier International, which is Dollar Tree's parent company, and they were made in China. So these are going to be really easy to open because they're just a plastic sleeve with another plastic sleeve inside, plastic on plastic on plastic. So we're gonna remove our little interior card, and inside we have 8 liquid poured watercolors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have white, purple, yellow, orange, red, green, blue, and black. And we have this thing here, my favorite watercolor brush in the entire world. I've sure mentioned them a lot. So for today's review, we're going to do a little bit of swatching, and we may even do a color wheel. So for our swatches, I'm actually going to use another Jot product. You guys who've watched some of my other Dollar Tree reviews might recognize this. This is one of the Jot watercolor brushes. This is their natural hair brush, and this is their size 10 brush. We received 5 of these for $1. We are going to be swatching on Canson XL watercolor paper, and I have a cup of clean water handy and at the ready. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to actually put a line, draw a line in the sand, because we're going to do a little bit of opacity testing first, and we're going to swatch. So what I want to do is I'm going to draw a box for our white watercolor, and that way we'll know where it is. And then we're going to do an opacity test. So I'm going to put down a black line, and afterwards we're going to do a color wheel. So I'm going to let this cure for 5 minutes and come back to it. Okay, so that has had a chance to cure. I'm going to drop a little bit of water in each pan. Now, my theory is that these are very similar to the Crayola and the Up and Up and the other Dollar Tree watercolors that I've reviewed in the past, where they are probably dye-based watercolors in a glycerin suspension. And the reason I think that is those tend to be the most easily washed. They come out of clothing a little bit more easily, and pigments have a higher tendency of staining. If you are interested in watercolor reviews of a different caliber, I do recommend you check out my watercolor playlist. Alright, so they activate fairly easily. Doesn't seem to be a lot of paint in there, but they're $1. And they seem already a little bit thin. Yeah, they definitely seem a little bit thin. But they seem like they're aimed at maybe younger artists. Given the packaging, the form factor is very reminiscent of Crayola watercolors. And in that regard, they're not terrible. And I picked these up because my Dollar Tree did not have tube watercolors. Tyra has actually sent me some tube watercolors from her Dollar Tree, so I'm going to check those out in the near future. and hopefully those will perform a little bit better. But again, these aren't the worst. Next I'm going to do an opacity test, and the white is just about useless. But that's okay. I'm not a big fan of white watercolors to begin with. And even though I'm working pretty thick, there's not really a lot of water going on. They're not particularly saturated. There's not a lot of color going on here. What I'm thinking, because I'm thinking about the field test that I'm going to do in the future where I throw a bunch of these materials together and see how they handle, is I will probably use this set for my underpainting and kind of starting and establishing color, but we'll have to mess around with the set a little bit more in this review, and it's going to give me a better idea of how to use these. But if you're looking for a cheap thrill, maybe you want to practice doing some of those loose floral watercolors, the set might be an alright way to practice. I mean, basically what I'm noticing is this isn't really any worse than the Crayola washable watercolors that I've used. I'm really not a fan of those. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a gradation test. I mean, I kind of don't expect anything I'm getting at Dollar Tree other than the ceramic plate, which we've already talked about, for me to be like, this is the best thing ever, don't buy this anywhere else. Maybe some of the mechanical pencils that I'm going to get to in the future too. I mean, it's Dollar Tree. It's not intended to be high-end. It's intended to be cost-effective and get you through the situation. But I'm really excited that Dollar Tree is selling more stationery supplies and more art supplies, because for many people, Dollar Tree is a very accessible place. Most communities have a Dollar Tree, and most people can justify spending $1, especially for something that's often seen as frivolous like art supplies. You know, $1 is a much easier justification than $5, $10, $25, $100. So that's why I still do these affordable art supply reviews regularly, is because I want to acknowledge my roots, and I also want to acknowledge that I am aware that there are a lot of people who Dollar Tree is what they've got, so that's what they're going to spend. While these dry, I'm going to do a color wheel. And maybe I won't do every single color on the wheel. Now, I have never tried to wash these out of clothes. I have never tried to wash these out of a kid's shirt or off of a kid's hand. So these might be highly staining. That's not a property I'm looking for, and it's not a property I'm testing. So you guys who are more familiar with these might have to let me know in the comments below what your experiences are with these when it comes to kiddos. But I think they're pretty comparable to the Crayola washable watercolors, and they're much cheaper. So unless there's a toxicity issue, which you guys are going to have to let me know about that. I think in terms of, like, if you were supplying this for a class and you don't have access to a bulk rate, if you're supplying this for a summer camp, if you're supplying this for, oh, I should have made my, look, got this huge gap between the greens, the green and the yellow. Let's bridge that gap over here. If you were supplying this for a class, or if you were supplying this for a summer camp, something like that, then this could be a very economical alternative to purchasing Crayola, especially if you don't have, you know, teacher pricing or bulk pricing. So I'm doing a little bit of color mixing just on the paper. We've got blue and yellow. We're gonna do orange and blue and see if we can't make a brown. This is also kind of a cool influence blue, which is nice. I paint a lot of grass and a lot of grassy textures, so that's really something that works better for me. Now let's try mixing a red with our blue. The red's a little bit muddy in terms of color, but again, it's not anything worse than the Crayola ones. So we don't get a purple by mixing red and blue, we get a gray. Let's try their purple and a blue. So these are not going to be great for mixing colors. They tend to muddy out really quick. So if you're going to use these, you're going to want to try and stay kind of with limited mixes or pure mixes, because even the red and yellow make kind of a, not an orange, I mean this is orange. It makes like just a weird kind of color, kind of a muddy color. And they see, I think I'm using these up pretty quick too. So that's the other consideration. So this could be good if you're doing a watercolor thing for like a day camp and you're only going to use it once or maybe twice. So these are not going to last you a very long time. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm actually going to try painting some flower petals and see if these paints might work for something like that. Okay, art nerds, so these have had a chance to dry. They look like they dry pretty chalky. There's probably some significant optical brighteners used in these paints. That doesn't really surprise me, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, these are dollar store watercolors, and they're performing like inexpensive watercolors do, and like inexpensive watercolors should to an extent. So I'm going to try lifting some of these colors, and then we're going to see how these would handle for like quick, very gestural floral paintings. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little quick lift test, see how prone these are to lifting and reactivating. There is some amount of lift, so they are probably not great if you're looking to do layer paintings. At least the blue lifted. The red is actually staying pretty much where it went down. Now my water is a little bit dirty, so some of the color you're seeing is coming from the water, not necessarily from the paints lifting and reactivating. Let's try reacting some of these paints. I'm already starting to see the bottom of some of these wells, so you're not really getting a lot of paint. These would not necessarily be good for repeated use or for larger paintings, that sort of thing. Now what you could do, what I see a lot of people do, is they will basically pop the paints out and use this as like a travel palette. But the packaging for this set is not really particularly great, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that either. And I feel a little bit bad because a lot of these reviews end up kind of turning into like, it was $1. What do we expect? It performs like dollar art supplies. And I kind of feel bad about that because it'd be nice to be like, this thing is exceptional and you should buy it and it's a great dollar spent. Because I think that's what some of you guys who are watching this are kind of hoping for. And it's kind of what I'm hoping for too. Like, I always want to discover the next great buy, the next great inexpensive amazing art supply that will make art more affordable and more accessible to more people. Like, that's really my goal. My goal isn't to just buy art supplies to dump on them. My goal is to help people find things that will work for them. So I'm applying another layer of color to this, and I definitely see here on the green where it's, you know, we've kind of run through it. I'm also going to apply another layer on some of these mixes just to see if we can kind of build up some color through glazing. I'm kind of taking this with a grain of salt because, you know, they're inexpensive. They're Dollar Tree watercolors that are aimed at probably young kids, you know. They're behaving kind of the way those sort of products typically behave. So they're not super great at glazing. We are getting a little bit more color depth. Now, if you bought a product like Crayola Watercolors, you would get more intense colors from the get-go. These are definitely kind of muted colors. So I'm gonna let these dry. I'm gonna go switch out my cup of water, and then when we return, we're gonna do some loose floral sort of sketches. Okay, art nerds, we are in the home stretch. I'm just gonna go ahead and flip this over. So I don't normally do too much loose, light floral watercolor stuff. I've done a few. You guys can check out some of my other examples on this channel, but I'm not pretending like I'm the expert. I just figured that is a good use case for these, or what people might be buying these for. So I have here that Jot Watercolor brush. This is their size 10, and I'm going to try just kind of several different techniques. And we're going to just kind of see how it goes. So I'm starting with a really saturated color in the middle, and then just kind of working progressively wet and blending it out. And it seems to work decently okay for this. Like, if this was something you wanted to practice, these could be a good, inexpensive way to kind of practice your brush strokes. They're only $1. And then the brush, which is not the greatest, is also only $1. So maybe that's a good use for these, other than like children's watercolor is just practicing sort of brush stroke dependent art. Because honestly, anything that's going to be dependent on using nice quality watercolors, these are not gonna be a good replacement for that. And that's okay. That's the thing about inexpensive art supplies, is like, as long as you know kind of what you're getting yourself into, you're aware of the flaws, you can kind of work around them. So we've hit the bottom for the red as well. And I'm kind of working wet into wet, and I'm trying to encourage color blending. And we've hit the bottom for the blue as well, so that's going to give you guys, I think even for children, this is kind of a stingy amount of paint. Not really enough paint to do much with. If you have a small child who likes a lot of color and they're wanting to put a lot of color down on their paper, these are not gonna be a good solution for that. I mean, maybe these would be okay for like a vacation Bible school where you switch activities every 30 minutes, or for a summer camp where you do something similar. But yeah, we use up the paint pretty quick, and it's not like we're really getting saturated color. But I am already really curious to hear what you guys are gonna say about these in the comments below. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you use them all up? Have you never tried them and now you're interested? Were you interested but never tried them and now you have second thoughts? Let me know. Give me some feedback. When it comes to inexpensive art supplies, it's like curiosity killed the cat. I can't help myself. I have to find out. I have to try it. Even though everyone's like, Becca, you know it's not going to be very good. But there's always that off chance. There's always that off chance that it's going to be all right. That it's going to be decent or worth more than $1. You know, there's like always the bargain kind of thing. That you might get a good deal. So this is kind of a fun technique to do with these though. We're getting nice kind of color migration. Interesting color migration at least. But gosh, these colors, they go fast. Just adding a little purple to kind of help differentiate between two of the blossoms. And yeah, now we're running out on the purple too. So these go fast. But you know what? On the same note, you could go buy Crayola washable watercolors and probably get more use out of them, especially for something that's kind of limited in terms of what you're doing and what techniques you're doing, because this isn't really so much about like layering color or wet into wet. This is really about just, you know, mark making and controlling the water. So for something like this, I mean, you could use Crayola. In fact, Crayola makes educational watercolors, and they also make the non-washable watercolors, which doesn't mean they're not washable. It just means they're not designed to be as washable. And those have some really nice color to them. So those could really be a good fit for this kind of thing. Now, when they dry, the colors are really very muted and desaturated. So that's kind of a bummer. But it's fun to play with it, and it's a technique and a style that I think I would like to revisit in the future. So I'm gonna let this dry. Alright, art nerds, I think that about covers it for the Dollar Tree Jot Watercolor set. You receive 8 colors in this little set, and you run through them really quick. Just to show you guys how quick I ran through some of those colors, that was used to paint this page here with the roses, which is still drying, and this test page over here. So what are my thoughts? Well, these are not the worst thing in the world. They do the job. They put color on the paper, but the colors are very pale. They lack saturation. It's in fact almost impossible to build up saturation, and there's a lot of optical brighteners. I found this out when I rinsed the cup the first time, and it looked like somebody had allowed, like, I don't know, sweethearts to dissolve in water or something. There's a lot of sedimentation. So they might look really bright in the container, but as you guys can see, they are not particularly bright and they're not particularly saturated. Who are these watercolors for? Well, it's pretty clear that these are intended for kids, although I don't know that I would give them to kids with this brush here that I didn't even use at all, with its beautiful plastic bristles designed to push paint around the paper. Instead, I used a Dollar Tree Jot Watercolor Brush, the size 12 brush from a prior review, and I found that that worked a lot better. So I don't necessarily think they are a great fit for kids. You don't get a lot of paint with them, and the brush they come with is just abysmal. But I don't necessarily think they're the best fit for adults either. Basically, if there's like a watercolor technique that you'd like to practice, you don't own any watercolor supplies, and you don't have access to a Walmart, a Winn-Dixie, a Kroger, a Safeway, any place that might sell the Crayola watercolors, or any other brand of watercolor, then they're okay. They will get the job done, but I don't think they can be used for anything more than what I'm showing you guys here. I think this is about the extent. Maybe you can use them for some brush lettering, but you can see from the colors that it's really desaturated and pale and just kind of underwhelming. Not even pastel, just pale. So I'm not sure that I would recommend them for brush letterers either. What they could be useful for is if you replace those brushes, or if you had better brushes for people to use, these could be useful in like a summer or a day camp sort of scenario where you don't want to necessarily purchase supplies that are going to be used over and over and over again. Maybe if you were doing like a homeschooled summer group, something like that, because you run out of paint really quickly, and Crayola sells refills for theirs, but these are not designed to be refilled. So they kind of scratch an itch, but they don't have any staying power, if that makes sense. So if you are doing a watercolor something for a one and done sort of scenario, these could be great. Maybe if you're looking for a little bit of watercolor for a card you're working on for somebody and it's just one card and you're not ever going to use watercolor again, these could be okay. But they do put color on the paper. They are not difficult to work with, and there's not really much else that can be said about these Dollar Tree watercolors. So I hope you guys found this review to be helpful, useful, and informative. You're probably wondering why I did this review. My really number one biggest complaint with these, we're not even going to talk about the color saturation because the Crayola washables have terrible color saturation too, is just how little paint you get. But you also only paid $1 for it, so it puts it in that like weird zone where I don't necessarily want to recommend it, because it also creates a lot of waste because it's almost a one and done kind of product. I mean, you could buy them, you could clean them out, and then you could fill them with the paints of your choice. Like even Reeves paint would be a huge upgrade, and but then you're paying $1 per palette. Anyway, I'm really struggling to think of a situation where somebody would want to buy these paints over other paints, other like Crayola or Prang or Up and Up paints that are already on the market. But I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope you found it useful and maybe even a little bit of inspirational. If you've got some kids' grade watercolors at home, you can do this illustration yourself. You guys saw how easy it was, and it turned out pretty cute. And I'm sure yours will turn out even better than mine. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys again really soon with more Dollar Tree reviews. Bye guys!